Hey there, guys. So we wanted to carry on the discussion about the Great Reset. We wanted to talk about this is part two. Discussed a whole lot of things about it the other day. So where did we finish off? Well, one of the big things is no private property. Of course, the Pope has been talking about that, saying private property is a secondary right. No, I'm afraid in order to have liberty, it is a primary right. Also, lack of privacy. Klaus Schwab says we're all going to accept that, we will have to have a lack of privacy. And they're talking about the privacy laws that we are used to in the West being an impediment to their goals. They're talking about reading our thoughts, reading our dreams. I mean, imagine you don't even have control of your own thoughts, of your own dreams. Can you imagine being in more of an imprisoned state than that? I suppose that's why, like with Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, she's talking about prosecuting people for what they say at a dinner party or a gathering in their own front room. So imagine your friend stitching you up and saying, they fall out with you. They say, so-and-so said this, that was a bit off colour. The next thing, the police are prosecuting you for something you said in the privacy of your own home. Imagine having a thought crime. Gives new meaning to the word thought crime, doesn't it? Right. Just to say, when they say getting rid of private property, people think, well, how will that happen? But think how low interest rates are and how overextended people are, especially with COVID. You just have to raise the interest rate slightly. Plus, with inflation, with people having no disposable income, being pushed to the limit, with inflation and slightly high interest rates. And what do you have? People won't be able to pay their mortgage. Plus, they have this thing where you're going to hire everything. You will own nothing and you will be happy. You'll have no privacy and you will be happy. Says who? Says who that will be happy? But anyway, most people afford things because they have credit cards and they can use credit. But if credit becomes prohibitively expensive in terms of the interest rate, it will push people in a situation where they can hire something. So instead of buying something of your own, which would be too expensive to buy it outright, you might just hire it for a few days when you want it. So you can see how with a very high interest rate and people not being able to use credit to purchase, that also might come in. Right, so there was a tweet the other day on LBC. Apparently in the UK, they're thinking of waiving the 2-week quarantine period for travelers who are a significant business people. I forget their exact words, or who are of people of importance. You see how I always said this whole reset is not for them, the elites, it's for us. And you see that already coming. Certain people, now who decides who is so important that they don't have to undergo the quarantine? You know who it's going to be. The elites, tech giants, the billionaires, the politicians. Remember when they said your job was not essential? Now they're telling you your business travel isn't essential. You've got to do the 2 weeks quarantine. But no, the elites don't, because none of this is for them. And people need to just wake up to that. I know I'm speaking to the converted here. You guys are already awake to it. A lot of people saying that the reason the government have got this magic money tree, they're just throwing money after money after money on furlough payments or payments here, payments there, incentives, blah, 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 foreign aid, is because it's all going to be written off because they are carrying out the agenda to the T. So you can see Boris Johnson, in contravention of everything that was said at the election, is now aiming for the zero or minimal carbon emissions by 2030. The UK will have one of the lowest carbon emissions in the world at 2020. The huge economic and social cost to that is enormous. Enormous. People don't understand. They think, oh, that's nice. Oh, lower carbon emissions, that's great. No, it's not, because people don't understand the sacrifice that's going to have to be made and what it could potentially do to the UK. But I believe that when they're signing up to all those things, it's because they know they're going to get bailed out, or, probably worse. Now, this word reimagine. Justin Trudeau talking in a speech about how they, politicians and the elites, are going to reimagine a new world economy, reimagine a new normal. Well, I'm afraid this is communism. This is the 10-year or the 5-year communism plan, because it's not up to governments to reimagine anything. It happens organically, driven by the private sector. It's the private sector that responds to demand, that innovates, that drives society forward. Whenever you've got politicians doing plans about how to reimagine stuff, that, my friends, is communism. My comrades, is communism, huh? Do you notice that so many people are speaking in America, people from Venezuela, people from Soviet Union, people whose parents came from the Soviet Union, people who came from Cuba and escaped. So many people who escaped other countries say they recognize exactly the rhetoric of the Democrat Party. They understand everything they're saying chimes with what happens when you are on the road to Venezuela. And I think we're probably hearing it here, but it's just not as heightened in our mind because we haven't just had an election stolen, although we effectively did, didn't we? Because we voted in Boris and we've got something else totally. So this Schwab person, he founded the World Economic Forum. He chairs it. He's very popular with China. They've given him all sorts of awards, and he's had numerous honorary doctorates from universities all around the world because, as you know, these universities are bastions of Marxism. He's also a big fan of Bill Gates, meets with all these people, and he's a lover of the V. Okay, so communism, what does communism mean? Communism is the takeover of business and industry by the government. What's fascism? Fascism is using the state to protect and advance the interests of the wealthy elite, which is exactly what's happening now. And what about all these governors, Newsom, Cuomo, Lightfoot, all these governors and mayors? What are they doing? They're making sure their laws shut down small business, but the big businesses are not affected. They are protecting the rights of big business. They are protecting the elite. And now, as an example about people being able to waiver the quarantine if they are considered elite, you can see how the government is protecting the interests of a corporate elite, while we are told we are non-essential, we can't run our business, while we are run into the ground. Big buzzword is stakeholder capitalism. That's not capitalism. That means that, say you've got a table of decision makers, you might have 12 people. Out of the 11, they all billionaires, leaders of huge corporations, some are politicians. One might be the person elected by the public. So instead of having all your decision makers elected by the public, out of a group of 12, there's maybe one representative, one that was elected by the government. This is not democracy anymore. I had this thing up from on Amazon about the Great Reset. I must tell you, I read these reviews. They're really good. Even people who gave it 5 stars actually hated the concept. They thought it was like a good book explaining it. That's why they gave it 5 stars. But they hated the concept. So it's worth reading all these reviews. People were thoroughly saying, like, no way, this is ridiculous. We don't like it. It's communism, it's controlling, it's totalitarianism. No one of these reviews, these ratings, was actually endorsing the idea. They were all rubbishing it, no matter what star they gave it. Just these words here. Change is needed to create a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable world. So these are the words to look out for, guys. Anytime you hear the words inclusive, resilient, sustainable, it all means agenda. Sorry about the background there. It all means Agenda 21, right? Or basically Agenda 21, the Great Reset, all pretty much the same thing. So look out for those words. Somehow those words are the magic words. Even if it's murder, as long as it's sustainable murder, as long as it's resilient murder, as long as it's equitable murder, it's got to be okay, right? Because everything is okay when you're talking about the Great Bleeding Reset. Okay, so what else have we got here? The whole gist of it is that humans only exist as wealth creators for the 1%. So these public-private partnerships will replace democracy. It means really you're only going to get contracts if you're in with the elite. Everything's just going to be big companies. I noticed Nicola Sturgeon was saying, that's the leader of Scotland, the Scottish Communist Party, better known as the Scottish National Party, which is not what it is. So Nicola Sturgeon, the leader of the Scottish Communist Party, was saying that if they go to a 4-day week, it will be fantastic because up to 60,000 jobs can be created in the public sector. Public sector jobs don't create wealth. What public sector jobs do is create controlled people, because you have to toe the line. You have to be subjected to all the government brainwashing if you were in a public sector job, or you lose your job. So it's a way of taking freedom from people, not improving the economy. So they want to reduce, this Great Reset is about reducing everything in the world to profit. Every equation comes down to profit. Now, okay, some would say that's capitalism already, but no, this is on steroids, right? So someone gave the example of when the settlers came to America. It wasn't that the American Indians didn't have the capacity to fight them off, to stand up for themselves. The fact was they didn't understand the technology, so they didn't even know what they were up against. And I think that's a problem for a lot of people going into this reset. We don't fully understand what we're up against because we don't understand how advanced this technology is. On the other hand, it's possible they're gaslighting us and this technology doesn't exist. It isn't that advanced at all, and they're just trying to cast this spell over us, but making us think that this technology is so Orwellian and omnipotent. Maybe it actually isn't. So, okay, he loves drones, this Klaus Schwab. He wants drones controlling us, delivering stuff to us, watching us, patrolling. I think I mentioned that. He just loves drones, and he says they can also replace workers. So very keen on AI automation. Now listen to this, because a few people in our professional classes should take note, because he says lawyers, doctors, accountants, journalists, and insurance underwriters have all had their day. So a lot of people who are going along with this quite enthusiastically, or are totally asleep and refuse to be woken up, their careers on the chopping board, because he says their career is actually non-essential as well. And what more, journalists, he says 90% of news will be created by algorithm. Well, I think it almost is, because everyone takes their news from Reuters. Journalists are only there to amplify the government's message or the message of the 1%. Journalists don't do any investigative work. They repeat sources that are not good sources. I always get so furious when I hear them reporting the Observatory for Syrian Human Rights says. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a guy in a flat in Coventry who hasn't been to Syria for 14 years, and he's just a purveyor of hearsay for an agenda. But they call that a source. So at the moment, we don't have a fourth estate. The fourth estate is in the alternate media, and thank goodness we see CNN. They're trying to find a buyer for it to offload it. I think Bezos might buy it. All the mainstream are crumbling, and if anyone's been watching Twitter for the latest from what the BBC are up to, I think they're going to defund the BBC movement. Is going to go through the roof. All these outlets, these dinosaur outlets, are putting nails in their coffin every day through their behavior, through their bias, through their relentless pushing of the sickening and illogical woke themes that they intend on doing. And they're divisive. All this wokeness is not to bring people together or make people kind and more compassionate. It's to divide people, to wind people up against each other so that we all are fighting each other instead of focusing on them, because they know that we're the 99.999%. They're a tiny group of families, 100 families controlling this. If we unite, we're unstoppable. That's why they need us bickering amongst each other. So again, he talks about AI, robotics, the Internet of Things, 3D printing, nanotech, blockchain, material science, energy storage, quantum computing. Each of these come together in a fusion of control. Also a lot about online education, right? And obviously Bill Gates heavily involved in that. And what did the whole pandemic push kids towards? Online education. So the shutting down of retail, the stopping of traveling, the decimating of the hospitality, getting kids to stay and learn from home because of the pandemic dovetails perfectly with the agenda here. There will also be sensors in clothes. Why we need that. Accessories, sensors in the sewage. I talked about that in section 1. Even things like cows, horses, animals, plants. They want everything categorized in a massive system of surveillance so that they know where literally every being, every living thing on the planet, or even non-living things is. As I say, there's nanotechnology in our food, nanotechnology being dispersed in the air. God knows what they're doing. I don't think they've got control over this. I think it's possible that AI takes over in a way, almost like a runaway train, where they lose control. They can't. The controls jam, and they can't manage the control. So they won't even be in control of this. It could be in control of all of us, like a runaway train. That's what they're not thinking of. But anyway, they complain about our obsession with privacy. Sorry guys, if you want privacy, you're just obsessive. I mean, why should you want that? Why wouldn't you want the government knowing everything you think? Then you'll get idiots that say, well, if you're doing nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. Yeah, I'm not worried about myself. I'm worried about unscrupulous people with disgusting ulterior motives and criminals getting hold of my information. It's not a case of what I've got to hide. It's what people are trying to capitalize off by getting into my business? Why do you have fences around your property and locks on your doors? It's not because you're committing crime in your house. It's so outside criminals can't get in. But you see, this whole thing, it's a total hijacking of free will. And that's what it is. If you don't have your own mind, then you have no free will. Everything in this great reset is about what Mr. Schwab calls value. I mean, there's no emphasis on human needs. I mean, we just all mugs. We just all pawns in their game. I mean, I did a vlog. It was a talk rather than a video a while ago on this patent number where you are rewarded in terms of credits, in terms of tasks you do. So you were almost hooked up to your home hub. You do certain tasks, you earn credit in the sort of AI system. And what it is it's basically teaching AI to be you, teaching AI what you do, how to do your job. All your day-to-day functions are being learned by AI. So as you are being rewarded by doing these tasks, what you're actually in effect doing is teaching AI to do what you do every day, whether it's your job or your day-to-day thing. So it's a way of teaching AI, and I'll have to find a link to that and put it under here. Give me a while on that one because I can't remember what it was called. So there are unprecedented threats to our freedoms. You know, all the surveillance, control, reading our thoughts, changing our behavior. Okay, lots more to come, but I'm going to leave that till part 3. Okay.